Barakada Yahweh, Barakada Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4. And there went out another horse that was red, and this is speaking of the so-called horsemen of the apocalypse, which is simply dealing with events that would be taking place in the end times. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. And in the scriptures, horses can be symbolic for power, and this red horse is speaking of Esau, Edom, and his power structure, his kingdom that he would be ruling from. And when we go through the scriptures, it perfectly breaks down that this red horse is speaking of Esau, Edom. This is Genesis chapter 25, verse 25. And the first came out red. And there was a horse that came out that was red all over, like in hairy garment. And they called his name Esau. And the biblical Edomites today are known as these so-called white people. These Americans, the British, Europeans, Russians, South Afrikaners, the little hats over in the Holy Land, etc., etc. And what else was a major feature of this red horse? And there was given unto him a great sword. Let's go to Genesis chapter 27, verses 38 to 40, which is dealing with the blessing that Esau received from his father Isaac, which his descendants, the Edomites today, have this blessing as well. Genesis 27, verses 38 to 40. And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And when you read up in this chapter, Esau's brother Jacob, who is the progenitor of the 12 tribes of Israel today, known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, supplanted the blessing and the birthright to the kingdom of heaven from Esau, his brother. And Isaac, his father, answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. And what does it say in Job chapter 9, verse 24? The earth is given into the hands of the wicked. And as pursuant to Malachi 1, verse 4, the border of wickedness is the Edomites. So one of Esau's blessings was to gain the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven from above, live in and be in control of some of the most choicest places on the planet Earth. And when you look at a lot of these major resource trades and important places on the planet, you have Edomites dwelling there and in control of them, or at least have a hand in dealing with the business, the transactions, and the movement of many major natural resources on the planet. In the dew of heaven from above, these Edomites have low orbit space stations and satellites, and are more or less in control of a low orbit space right now. Verse 40, and by thy sword thou shalt live. That was another blessing that Esau was given to gain the fatness of the earth in the dew of heaven, his military might. And it's very clear to see that these Edomites have the strongest militaries on the face of the earth right now. And how did the Edomites gain control of the planet when they came back into rulership, beginning with the Renaissance? Through colonization, through their military might, through gunpowder and cannonballs in the past, moving up to machine guns, airplanes, tanks, and ultimately those nuclear weapons. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. And the Edomites were servants to the nation of Israel under King David and under his son, King Solomon. But they began to break that yoke from off their neck after King Solomon passed away. And then they really started coming into their groove with Alexander the Macedonian, Alexander the Greek, with the Grecian empires. Then you had the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire. Then they fell out of power for 1,000 years, known as the Dark Ages, when the children of Israel ruled Europe. And then they started coming back into power. This little season of their final rulership we're living in, beginning with the Renaissance. And here we are today with these Edomites in control of the planet right now. And what have they done with this sword of theirs, as it says back in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4? And power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth. And ever since these Edomites came into power during the Renaissance, we can see that peace has clearly been taken from the earth. Look at all the atrocities these Edomites have committed, from European colonization to American so-called police actions all across the planet. Millions upon millions of people have died under this Edomites' rulership. 2 horrific world wars took place under this Edomites' rulership. World War III, which will go nuclear, is going to take place under this Edomites' rulership. And look at what he's done to the environment, to the planet. Chemtrails in the sky, pollution in the ocean, causing marine life to beach themselves on these shores because they can't handle it. Animals being hunted to extinction. GMO foods giving people cancer. Wi-Fi and cell radiation further giving people cancer. All these toxic ideologies like feminism, the alphabet group beginning with LG, capitalism, socialism, democracy, just ruining the people's mindsets out here, turning everybody against each other, turning men and women against each other, breaking the family apart, women becoming whores. We could be here all day talking about the atrocities and the unrighteous decrees that this Edomite has committed that has taken peace from the earth. And in this video, I'll be going into a few articles just to further give examples of how this Edomite has taken peace from the earth. And the first article I'll be going to is on RT.com, titled "Kissinger Behind 3 Million Civilian Deaths, The Intercept." The former U.S. diplomat's actions caused, among others, 150,000 Cambodian civilians to die, an outlet investigation has claimed. And Henry Kissinger is clearly an Edomite. He's actually an Amalekite Edomite, or one of those small hats. And as we'll see in this article, a lot of policies and initiatives he had a hand in led to millions of deaths of people in that Southeast Asian region during the so-called, Cold War, during that Vietnam War era in the late 60s and the 70s. And the inspiration of this lesson came from a conversation I was having with a brother in our chat the other day, where he had brought up this article, and then I was just bringing up some more information about all the diabolical shit that Esau in America did during the Vietnam War, which Abaratazah will get into. But as this article reads, Henry Kissinger, the foreign policy eminence, Grise, who has advised half a dozen U.S. presidents, has caused the deaths of over 3 million people, according to an Intercept report published Tuesday to mark the realpolitik strategist's 100th birthday. So they're saying 3 million deaths are attributed to just one Edomite. So imagine these Edomites as a whole and the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of deaths that are attributed to their nation since they came into this little season of their final rulership, beginning with the Renaissance. And we can't forget all the death and destruction they committed under the Romans and under the Grecians. While critics of the Nixon-era Secretary of State and National Security Advisor often describe him as a war criminal for his pivotal role in the numerous U.S.-backed genocides and coups, the report argues Kissinger's body count has been widely underestimated, particularly regarding the secretive, highly illegal expansion of the Vietnam War into Cambodia in the 1970s. Between the genocides he sponsored in East Timor and Bangladesh, continent-wide terrorism, coups, and death squads in Latin America, known as Operation Condor, the fomenting of civil wars in southern Africa, and the carpet bombing of Cambodia and Laos under the guise of chasing the Vietnamese, Kissinger is believed to be responsible for over 3 million civilian deaths, more if one counts the casualties that had resulted from advice he gave to the private sector. Clearly, as it says back in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4, and there went out another horse that was red, and power was given unto him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another, and that them killing one another goes into these Edomites. Not only they've clearly fought against these other nations of people on the earth, but they've also heavily fought against each other. You had the European powers fighting each other during the age of colonialism, and then you had heavy Edomite on Edomite, white on white crime and violence during World War I and World War II. And we're seeing it today with this Ukrainian conflict, with Russian Edomites going against Ukrainian Edomites. And they've also caused the other nations on this planet to go against each other and kill each other as well. By what? Fomenting these false flag operations, these regime changes, these different coups, these American, well, not just American, but different Edomite arms companies, which, if you look at the top weapons manufacturers on the planet, the first couple of spots go to Edomite companies. These different Edomite arms companies have sold these different nations all these guns and military hardware, to kill each other in situations, political unrest, civil unrest that these very same Edomite governments have fomented for their own gains, their own means, to set up puppet governments and steal those nations' resources. Kissinger has only acknowledged that his actions caused the deaths of 50,000 Cambodians and blames the Vietnamese, the supposed target of the U.S. bombing campaign, the coordinates of which were logged incorrectly so as to be recorded as legal strikes in Vietnam. Slovakia. Intercept reporter Nick Trues argues that the number is closer to 150,000, pointing to numerous documented examples of egregious and deliberate undercounting of civilian casualties. The figure represents over 6 times more civilians than the U.S. has killed in airstrikes since 9/11. I'm going to skip around a bit just to get to the main points. Kissinger's now infamous directive to shoot anything that flies on Earth, anything that flies on anything that moves, exploded the secret war, tripling the number of bombings by the end of the year. He allegedly approved all 3,875 individual bombings. He allegedly approved all of them of the war, and the bombers dropped over 257,000 tons of explosives on Cambodia in 1973. Kissinger's carpet bombing of Cambodia paved the way for the Khmer Rouge, the genocidal dictatorship that killed 2 million Cambodians, 20% of the country's population, which he privately and approvingly referred to as murderous thugs while helping them secure regional allies. An example of them causing people to kill one another. Kissinger having a hand in helping the Khmer Rouge, which, as we read, killed 2 million of their own citizens. And when you look up the history of the Khmer Rouge and the killing fields of Cambodia, that's another horrific part in history that these Edomites had a hand in. But now let's get some quotes from this devil, Henry Kissinger. To be an enemy of America can be dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. And look at all the allies America ever had. They eventually threw them under the bus after they were done using them and got what they wanted. Henry Kissinger had another quote, said America doesn't have friends or enemies, but only interests. Let's look at Vietnam, for example. They were allies with South Vietnam to try to set up a democratic capitalist government down there. But what did they do? They threw them under the bus, and then North Vietnam took over Vietnam as a whole. And a lot of those South Vietnamese people that were in high positions of power with the U.S., they were put on the wall and executed. Look at Iraq. The U.S., and it's well known that the U.S. helped Saddam Hussein's regime against Iran during the Iranian-Iraq War in the 1980s. But then what did they do? They went to war against Iraq 2 different times, with the 2003 invasion leading to the toppling of the Iraqi government. And now look at that country. It's a mess. It's a third world shithole. The list goes on and on. Oh, and lest we forget Afghanistan. The U.S. went to Afghanistan to fight against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, which when you look into Osama bin Laden, he was actually a CIA asset used by the U.S. The U.S. went there to bring democracy and women's rights and all that, which they were really just going there to what? Make money off of the opium trade and try to gain control of the rare earth minerals resources in Afghanistan. When things didn't go good in Afghanistan, after 20 or so years of war there, they just left, and that country completely toppled, and now the Taliban's back in control. Here's another quote from our boy, Henry. Control oil, and you control nations. Control food, and you control the people. It's spoken like a true devil. It's all about control and domination of the peoples on the planet by any means necessary, by any horrific, genocidal, death-dealing means necessary. And here's a quote from Henry Kissinger about the very U.S. troops that were used in his policies to for the U.S. to gain advantage in these different wars they were in. Military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. And what's that term? Expendable. The U.S. military are nothing more than just expendable assets that can be killed and maimed and destroyed as long as we reach our strategic goals, our economic goals. So that's it with this one devil. Let me see where I want to go next. Before I get into another devil who also had a heavy hand in the Vietnam War, I'm going to go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come first, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, which are these Edomites, and they have been revealed by the prophets of the Most High, the men of the Lord, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, going out onto the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles like this, exposing the man of sin, the son of perdition, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. But let's go in to the Strongs for that word perdition, which is G684, apolia, destroying, utter destruction. And a great sword was given to that red horse to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. Of vessels, and what's the human body? It's an example of a vessel. Kissinger behind 3 million civilian deaths. Hey, that son of perdition, that son of utter destruction, son of death. But now, let's get into another devil named Robert McNamara and some of the horrific policies he enacted during the Vietnam War. And this is an article from taskandpurpose.com. Inside the Pentagon's shameful effort to draft mentally disabled men to fight in Vietnam. Even the mentally disabled and the lower echelons of society have no mercy from this devil. Some soldiers refer to them as McNamara's morons. And remember what Kissinger said about soldiers: they're nothing more than dumb dogs to be used any way we see fit. In 1967, a young man named Johnny Gupton was drafted into the army to fight in Vietnam. Gupton didn't know how to read or write. He didn't even know what state he was from. He had never heard of Vietnam. When a fellow soldier questioned a non-commissioned officer, NCO, about how someone with such an obvious mental disability could join the army, the NCO responded, he's one of McNamara's morons. This is what soldiers like Gupton were known as throughout the armed forces during the Vietnam War era. In 1967, Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, an Edomite, lowered military recruitment standards as part of a program called Project 100,000. Its goal, as the name suggests, was to recruit 100,000 men each year who were otherwise mentally, physically, or psychologically unqualified for the service. These men all had IQs below 91, and nearly half had IQs below 71. From the project's launch in 1966 through its termination in 1971, it allowed 354,000 previously ineligible men into the military. Of these, 5,478 died in combat and 20,270 were wounded. And not just did that devil Robert McNamara institute Project 100,000, but if you look at all the different strategies he implemented during Vietnam, it just further goes to show how much of a devil these Edomites were. He was a mathematician during World War II that dealt with doing mathematical calculations with the U.S. Army Air Force and their bombers to show that if we did so many strikes, we could capitulate the Germans into surrender, that they should kill one another. And that he took those same mathematical ideas and applied them to Vietnam, because the strategy in Vietnam wasn't taking territory, because the U.S. couldn't go past the DMZ or demilitarized zone into North Vietnam, or that would draw in Russia and I believe China as well, and could have led to a nuclear exchange. So the U.S. was only confined to South Vietnam. So instead of taking territory, the policy of Vietnam was known as body count, which Robert McNamara had a big hand in, where he used mathematical calculations to calculate that if we killed so many Vietnamese that they wouldn't have anybody left and that they would just capitulate and give up. So that was clearly just a psychopaths and murderers war. They even gave out prizes and vacations to the soldiers that got the most kills. I would recommend you read a book called Kill Anything That Moves, which deals with a lot of the policies of the Vietnam War. And in one example in the book that the author brought up, in the mess hall on some of these different U.S. military bases where the soldiers ate their food at, they had like a scoreboard on the top of the door, And each week they would tally the soldier that got the most kills. Like I just said, the soldier that got the most kills would receive prizes, steak, extra steak and beer, or even go on vacation. Complete madness. And now, as we're reading, McNamara had a hand in getting mentally disabled men to go fight in Vietnam. These men were aggressively recruited and pushed through training without having met even the bare minimum of standards set for them. They were sent into combat in large numbers, and many died. They were promised greater benefits and opportunities as an incentive to join the military. But those who returned alive came home to broken promises and were abandoned by the government. Sounds like a lot of the U.S. Military veterans today from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a largely forgotten and shameful chapter in American, really Edomite history. Robert McNamara and the Johnson administration sold Project 100,000 as an expansion of Great Society welfare programs where poor, mentally disabled men could learn important life skills. Labor Secretary Daniel Moynihan said, "Expectations of what can be done in America are receding. Our best hope is to use the armed forces as a socializing experience for the poor." This is how the idea was sold to the public. There is much more obvious reasons reason to aggressively recruit mentally disabled soldiers. I'm gonna skip that part and just hit the main points. On October 1st, 1966, McNamara officially launched Project 100,000. His plan targeted those with the least ability to avoid the draft. Their high levels of poverty and mental disabilities guaranteed they could not receive student deferments. Many National Guard units were still segregated during the Vietnam era, which meant many so-called black men, because it's so-called black Americans or African Americans or Israelites of the Southern Kingdom, specifically the tribe of Judah in America, which meant many Judite men of conscription age could not enlist in their respective National Guard units to avoid being sent to Vietnam. In 1969, 42% of Mississippi's population was Judite, yet of their 10,365 National Guardsmen, only one was a Judite. So with children of privilege safe in America, the military got to work recruiting from the ranks of the mentally disabled. But I'm going to skip that part. Let me see. We'll read it. New standards. To explain how new standards men, this is what they officially were known as, were recruited, some more background information about the standards themselves will be necessary. Newly enlisted soldiers took the Armed Forces Qualification Test, AFQT, to determine their military aptitude. Tests were divided into 5 categories. Category 1, very high IQ, 124 and above. Category 2, above average IQ, 108 to 123. Category 3, 92 to 107. Category 4, below average, 72 to 91. Category 5, very below average, 71 or lower. Category 4 placed someone in the bottom 10th percentile of the population, with Category 5 indicating a cognitive disability of some kind. Traditionally, only Categories 1 to 3 were considered fit for military duty. Special waivers were allowed for people in Category 4, and those that scored in the range of Category 5 were completely barred from enlistment. Project 100,000 changed these standards. McNamara mandated that all Category 4 scorers be allowed to enlist. Category 5 enlistees were technically barred, but 30,301 were enlisted through a loophole known as administrative acceptance. This was designed to prevent draftees from avoiding military service by intentionally failing the AFQT. Induction centers could pass Category 5 testers if they found they possessed a higher mental level than implied by their test score. This practice was used on would-be draft dodgers, but was much more common for genuinely disabled people. Would-be draft dodgers who intentionally failed would be given the option to retake the test to avoid being administratively pushed through to a frontline infantry unit, which they almost always took. The only people who routinely got pushed through with Category 5 scores were people who could not test any better. Many of these recruits could not read or write at all, so how did they take the tests? They didn't. Recruiters took the test for them. A Cleveland-based Marine recruiter testified before Congress that forging test results was a common practice. Their test takers were so proficient at faking results that they could take the test and produce the exact test scores requested of them. Recruiters were so desperate to meet quotas that they would sign the names and forge paperwork for Category 5 recruits who could not even write their own names. Complete fucking devils is what you Edomites are. Military recruiting specifically targeted poor areas, both urban and rural, and you know exactly who the majority of people are who live there. And new standards recruits were disproportionately black. In a Rand Corporation study of the new standards recruits versus a control group of the military at large, 38% of these recruits were so-called black and so-called Hispanic. What do you know? Israelites being at the top of another destructive policy these Edomites push out here, because the so-called Hispanics are Israelites as well of the Northern Kingdom. Always notice Project 100,000. A large percent of these recruits were Israelites when they were pushing for the C019 jump shots. Who are they heavily pushing towards? The communities of so-called black, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Salakia. Compared to 10% of the control group, 13% read below a fourth grade level versus 1% of the control group. They were over twice as likely to come from the South. These demographics were targeted by Project 100,000 for a reason. That's pretty much it with this article. You get the point. But hey, just another example of this red horse with that great sword taking peace from the earth, the son of perdition, causing people to get destroyed, whether his own soldiers or all those civilians that get killed in these destructive wars that these Edomites, especially in the United States of America, wage all across the planet. And they talk a little bit about Project 100,000 in that book, Kill Anything That Moves. There's one account of a soldier with his mental faculties that was among soldiers of Project 100,000. And he said during firefights, a lot of these soldiers didn't know what was going on. You know, they started crying and having mental breakdowns and died a miserable death in the jungles of Vietnam. So you Edomites got a lot to fucking pay for. And best believe all you Edomites, especially you higher ups out there, your Kissingers and your McNamara's, you're going to get the full force of judgment in the kingdom of heaven when you and your fellow Edomite brothers and sisters are slaves under the children of Israel in the kingdom of heaven. But now let's get back into these precepts. This is Daniel chapter 8, verses 25. And this is specifically speaking about Antiochus IV Epiphanes and all the horrific policies he instituted, which led to what? The deaths of many Israelites during his rule. Another example of these Edomites afflicting the children of Israel when they were in power. no different than your Robert McNamara's and these different American Edomite policies that are pushed today. But this can also apply, to Esau today, because he's enacting, the same not the same policies, but policies that also lead to death and destruction, disenfranchisement, and the Israelites getting screwed over. This is Daniel chapter 8, verse 25. And through his policy, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Project 100,000, perfect example of him causing craft to prosper through his policy. As we read in that article, a lot of recruits couldn't even read or write their own name, so they had military recruiters take the test for them so they could bolster up those numbers to send over to fight and die in Vietnam. And he shall magnify himself in his heart or in his mind, and by peace shall destroy many. What was the reason for going to Vietnam? Hey, we're bringing democracy and human rights to stop the spread of communism. To go to Iraq to topple a dictator who's abusing his people. To go to Iran, to go to Afghanistan to bring women's rights and stop terrorists. The list goes on and on. This Edomite pushes out this image like he's the savior, the good guy coming to help everybody. But really, what's the real reason? Overthrow sovereign leaders to set up puppets so they can take that nation's resources from them. And by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. This devil is even going to try to fight against Yahushai, the Son of the Most High, whom the world ignorantly refers to as so-called Jesus, when he makes his second coming. Hence why these different Edomite governments are coming up with space forces. But hey, he's going to be utterly broken, utterly defeated. Just read Revelation chapter 12, verse 7, that war in heaven, the dragon and his angels, Esau, Edom's power structure, and his military might trying to fight against Michael and his angels, Yahushai, the archangel Michael, and those fleet of chariots, which people ignorantly refer to as so-called UFOs. But what does it say? He shall be utterly destroyed, roughly paraphrasing, and shall be cast down to the ground. It's going to be a first round knockout, no contest. But now I'm going to go to Isaiah chapter 10, verses 1 to 2. Woe unto him that decree unrighteous decrees, and that right grievousness which they have prescribed. Again, Project 100,000. That's an unrighteous decree to get men that clearly aren't fit for military service and to lie on the tests so that they can make it through, to have them go fight and die in a war for nothing. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that right grievousness which they have prescribed. And what's some grievousness that was prescribed? Another example from our first article, Kissinger transcripts from the Intercept's exclusive archive of declassified U.S. military documents from a secret Pentagon War Crimes Task Force reveal it was Kissinger's decision to relay then President Richard Nixon's often drunk, belligerent trash talk about Cambodia into coherent instructions to the Pentagon to begin a massive bombing campaign in the country in 1970. Kissinger's now infamous directive to shoot anything that flies on anything that moves exploded the secret war, tripling the number of bombings by the end of the year. He allegedly approved all 3,875 individual bombings of the war, and the bombers dropped over 257,000 tons of explosives on Cambodia in 1973 alone. and that right grievousness which they have prescribed, authorizing all these bomb strikes on Cambodia and Vietnam, which led to hundreds of thousands, millions of deaths. And if you look up the statistics, more bombs were dropped on Vietnam than during World War II. To turn aside the needy from judgment and to take away the right from the poor of my people, the Israelites. And we can clearly see again with Project 100,000 that they turned aside the needy from judgment and took away the right from the poor of my people. You literally took away the right of mentally disabled men to decide whether they wanted to go fight in war or not by taking the test for them so that they would qualify to get drafted and go die in the jungles of Vietnam, that widows may be their prey and that they may rob the fatherless. So when we go throughout these scriptures to see who that red horse is, the wicked, the devil in the scriptures, we can clearly line it up with you Edomites and your track record throughout your history of rape, robbery, and murder. And like I said a little earlier, you Edomites aren't going to escape the judgment from Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai for all the wickedness you've committed against this planet, especially on the apple of his eye, the children of Israel, again, known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. But now I'm going to close it out in Isaiah chapter 14, start at verse 4. That thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and Babylon the Great, that virgin daughter of Babylon, mystery Babylon in the scriptures, is the United States of America. And the king of Babylon, well, you know, you've got the presidents and all that, which are just puppets. The king of Babylon is ultimately the elites, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, that are the true hidden hand running America. That thou shalt, and that are also going to be the first fruits of slavery in the kingdom of heaven, that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. Salakia. Yahweh hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, finally taking you Edomites out of power, which is going to begin when his son Yahushua makes his second coming to make war against you Edomites. That war in heaven, Michael and his angel versus the dragon and his angels. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, colonization, World War I, World War II, the transatlantic slave trade, the Vietnam War, Project 100,000, dropping atomic bombs on people. He that ruled the nations in anger, regime change, stealing resources from these different nations, pushing these destructive policies and ideologies like feminism, capitalism, communism, socialism, democracy, which destroys the relationship between men and women, the family structure, etc., is persecuted and none hindereth. Salakia. Verse 7, the whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Once you Edomites are taken out of power and put into slavery, hey, this earth is finally going to see rest. You're no longer going to be spraying chemtrails in the sky, pouring pollution in the ocean, giving people GMO foods, Salakia, or using cell and Wi-Fi radiation to give them cancer, etc. And while all nations, all heathen nations, are going to go into slavery for that first 1,000 years of the kingdom of heaven, and afterwards, they're going to be able to go back to their lands and live in peace under the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. So they're going to see clean air, clean water, clean food, and what? The family structure back in order with the father at the head and the women and children underneath the father. They're going to see peace. And you know what? They aren't going to want to buck up to the Israelites. But as for you Edomites, after that first 1,000 years, every single one of you is going to be gathered up and permanently cold from this planet with fire. And that's going to be the end to this wicked nightmare, this wicked rulership that you ruled the people in great anger under. And it's not just going to be the people that are going to rejoice, as it's about to go into in verse 8. Yeah, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against us. Even nature itself is going to rejoice at you Edomites being taken out of power and no longer graping this planet with your destructive practices and policies. And we are quickly coming to the end of you Edomites' rulership, where you're going to be taken out of power. Hence, why there's so much talk of World War III in the news and the use of nuclear weapons. Your birth rates are declining globally, and your countries and economies are collapsing globally. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites, the wicked, that red horse in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.